Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we're going to look at a couple ways of painting a Dire Avenger's face. This is the helmeted version of the face, not the unhelmeted version. And as you can see here, we simply have a Dire Avenger, and the helmet has been base coated. The rest of the model is just sitting in prime. And to get us started, we're going to use some Citadel contrast. This is the Black Templar. And basically this one here is really kind of a fast way of getting it done. So if you don't already own contrast, I highly would recommend it, as it's a really nice way and a fast way of getting it done. Here I'm just simply indicating that what we're going to do is we're simply going to push the color towards the edges of the face so that we're avoiding the raised portions of the helmet. Now this of course requires you having a good brush that can come to a nice fine point. You can see here I'm coming into certain angles and I'm just simply changing the angle of the brush so that I'm not inadvertently hitting anything. I have a very generous amount of pigment into the bristles, and you can see just really quickly, just kind of quickly laying it in, letting the color do what it does, where it just basically, because of surface tension, it falls within the recesses and it makes life a little bit easier. And that's really one of the big draws of using these particular paints. Oop, made a little mistake there. That's one of the big draws of using these colors, is that it really does make this kind of painting easy, is using contrast. And so we'll set it aside, allow it to dry, and then we'll have a quick look at it. So presto changeo, it is dry. And you can see here, you know, because it's the contrast, any of the bright points kind of show through. But if you want to establish the highlights yourself, you're free to do so. And of course you can use regular Citadel paints right on top of this. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of Celestra Gray, throw it onto my palette, thin it down just a hair with just the dampness of my brush, and then just very carefully pick out the edges around the eyes, or anywhere really you want to imagine highlights. So just underneath the eyes, across the bridge of the nose kind of space, kind of thing. And again, this does require, you know, obviously your brush being able to come to a nice point. Here I'm just going to throw one of the fancy little highlights coming down the face mask as such. A little too much pigment, so I just simply wipe it with my hand really fast and gets that nice sharp little highlight. And you know, there we go. That's a pretty fast way of getting those faces painted, and to you know, relative ease, and it looks all right. Here's another example. We're going to use Abaddon Black this time. So let's pretend we don't use contrast. We don't have contrast. We're going to use Abaddon Black, Lamian Medium, or Lamian Medium. And in this jar here, I have Liquitex Floaid. And basically, I'm just going to use a little drop of paint, a drop of Floaid, and a drop of medium. And in fact, I probably could have went 2 paint to 1 drop and 1 drop. Just because it was pretty thin, and it did act more like the Shade Watch, which actually acts more like the contrast. So in actuality, this is a bit of the same, but doing it with 2 different products and getting a similar result. This doesn't work exactly the same as contrast, but it is pretty darn close in the fact that we can just simply be mindful of our angles, making sure that we have a nice sharp brush, and we simply just be mindful of where we're placing, and we're pushing that pigment into those recesses. Again, it does require to be a little bit careful. The finish with the Abaddon Black is a little bit more consistent with more opaque colors, so you know, there is that. Whereas the contrast Black Templar dries with more of a transparency, whereas this is an opaque, and so it will cover on top. But there it is once it's dry, and of course we can highlight this up as in the usual fashion. But that is it. So a huge thank you to my patrons, a huge thank you to fellow who asked the question, and we'll see you in the next video, and take care of those brushes.